today among friends and among people who are serious about struggle. I'm honored. And I bring you greetings from my family, my wife, Sufisha Madhubuti, Dr. Carol D. Lee, and from our children, and from the institutions that we built in Chicago, which is Third World Press, which will be 50 years old 2017. So we've got a big celebration on 2017, and our schools, we have 4 schools in Chicago, preschool, 2 K through 8s, one named after Betty Shabazz, the other named after Barbara Ann Sizemore, and then we have the DuSable Leadership Academy, which is a high school. Okay, and we were honored to have Beverly Lomax and Dr. Lomax to visit us a few years back. So I'm going to get right into this. For the last month, I've been working on this book, which will be out in April. The title of the book is Taking Bullets, and the full, Taking Bullets, Black Boys and Men in 21st Century America, Stopping Violence, Seeking Healing, and Standing Tall. And it's dedicated to and for a dear friend and brother who gave all and more. He is missed, Dr. Walter V. Lomax, Jr. Okay. So I'm going to say some things which may shock you, may not. But let me start with this. I start with a quote from, of all people, Susan Sontag, who was a philosopher, writer, essayist. In her book, Styles of Radical Will, which came out about 40, 50 years ago, she writes, and I quote, "The white race is the cancer of human history. It is the white race and it alone, its ideologies and inventions, which eradicates autonomous civilizations wherever it spreads, which has upset the ecological balance of the planet, which now threatens the very existence of life itself." End quote. So, as I write these words, this is about a month ago, the changing backdrop of America's political and domestic scenes is focused on Missouri, where Governor Jay Nixon activated the state's National Guard in his and the state's white leadership's anticipation of serious black rebellion. Of course, they call it riot. In the city of Ferguson. This action was spurred in the wake of the grand jury's decision not to indict police officer Darren Wilson for the murder of Michael Brown, an unarmed black teenager. I emphasize murder because upon reviewing and studying the case, any sane, objective, fair-minded person, and most certainly any person with knowledge of the United States history of black boys and men's relationship to local and national law enforcement and the legal establishment, will conclude that there is legally and logically only one possible outcome: murder. In all my books, I capitalize B because we are a culture, we are a people, all right? We are international. And 2 years earlier, July of 2013, was a similar backdrop and focus. A majority of the national black community and others thought that the Trayvon Martin case was clearly one of murder. Do I need to remind you of the conclusion there? George Zimmerman was acquitted of second-degree murder and manslaughter. And these 2 cases and countless others created a climate, recreated a climate of mistrust and criminal injustice of the criminal justice system that confront black boys and men in 21st century America. As you know, in terms of the Martin case, the police officer was not indicted, but the city of Ferguson was severely criticized because essentially the city, the police department was a criminal activity. It was like a game. It was a legal game. And basically taking advantage of black people at every level. Not treated as citizens at all. And it was involved in a criminal conspiracy. It represented a citywide criminal enterprise against the black citizens. The only answer to such criminal activity would be selective imprisonment and a total disbanding of the Ferguson Police Department and the city government as it is now constituted. Well, we've seen some resignations, but nobody's going to jail yet. And we've seen resignations with serious severance pay, like $100,000 or more. So the Cassandra cries of the existence of post-racial America by right-wing pundits, the Tea Party and the Republican Party are just, at best, their code words and signals for anti-Obamaism, right-wing fundamentalism, and upgrades their unrelenting attacks on progressive politics, attacks on the Democratic Party, attacks on black people, the poor, and others not in their club. They've been widely successful, as the 2014 midterm elections point out. Newsweek, which has reconstituted itself, had a cover story late last year entitled "The White Vote," and I quote Matthew Cooper's focus, much of his analysis on working class and quote-unquote middle class white men. He writes that, quote, "A disproportionate number of non-college white men seem to have in common, according to a poll, is a profound sense of aggrievement at the rich for rigging the system and the poor for getting benefits they don't deserve," end quote. The poor are generally defined as blacks, Latinos, and recently poor women of all cultures and races in the United States. What we have to do always is change the conversation. We have to always go on the attack. We have to not only defend ourselves, but essentially we have to have a narrative that essentially not only tell our side of the story and protects us, but must, as Professor Blockson has done with this center, put forth that which is positive, that which is correct, and that which is in our best interest. And so when we're changing the conversation, it is clear that we understand that essentially we are dealing with empire. This is the last empire in the world, the United States. And so it's very important to understand we're not just dealing with some new kids on the block. These are some bad boys, all right? And this rise of global economy, so Europe is attached to the United States. It's a shared history, culture, values, economics, wars, and philosophy of white supremacy and white nationalism. What you have to understand is that anytime you see West used, you're talking about white. Anytime something the West is going here, the West is in the, you're talking about white people, all right? And so with these shared values, so we must therefore understand and acknowledge that race in the United States is not the exception of its culture. It drives the culture. Race also dictates that we as black poets, writers, scholars, workers of all levels, and progressives, and mainly those activists who have given their lives to working and studying the issues of race must, like W.B. Du Bois and others of the last century, retake and control the territory of language, ideas, and creative actions. Race in the United States drives the culture in all the areas of human activity: family, religion, education, economics, politics, media, law, sports, entertainment, health, and of course, the military. The dominant, unspoken, undebated, and therefore unacknowledged narrative in the nation is race. This is especially on display in the demonization of black boys and men, as in the recent killing of the unarmed black teenager Michael Brown by Officer Darren Wilson in Ferguson, Missouri, where he described his confrontation with Mr. Brown as, quote, "the most intense, aggressive face. The only way I can describe it, it looked like a demon." A demon, all right? This demonization of the other as an enemy has a long active history in the United States. I'm not going to go through all this, but we're talking about from the genocidal elimination and appropriation of indigenous peoples' lands in the Americas, to the enslavement of tens of millions of African people and their parallel subhuman bondage in the 20th century, and I say Jane Crow. You can't separate the women from this, all right? It's Jane Crow too. To the internment, which is a polite word, of imprisonment of tens of thousands of people of Japanese heritage during European and the United States War on the World #2. See, it's their war on the world #2, not just World War II, okay? Commonly known as World War II. However, the rhetoric and the nomenclature of race often diminishes the horrific effects of white world supremacy and international white nationalism, which by any measure is not only alive and well in the 21st century, but most certainly in the United States, a growth industry. Seldom is in this country, do we at any level entertain the question of global colonialization, genocide, white settler land theft, or whole people enslavement due to race, color, economics, and location. The essential core and fundamental definition of North-South America is its history of white domination of native peoples, whether in the Americas, Africa, or Asia. We cannot understand or seriously approach with any ounce of truth in terms of the United States history without serious confrontation with how the nation was founded, formed, maintained, developed, grew, and prospered in its systematic conquering, colonization, and elimination and enslavement of native peoples. You know, I used to say back in the 60s, if I had 14, 15 million, black people, Africans, or any people working from sun up to sundown just for food, I can build a nation too. It's no, so the seizing of American land is not only it's not a pretty story, and its development is less appealing to young minds committed to the quote-unquote land of the free and home of the brave, end quote, narrative. And so I must state a few bold truths, because we're living under this state terrorism. It lives with us today, and it's unfiltered in terms of its demonization, economic control, enslaved education, mass incarceration of black and brown men, paralyzing and failing politics bordering on outright fascism, anti-intellectualism masquerading as knowledge, and liberating values that overpowers, directs, and determines the daily existence of black people, poor people, and others in the United States. So I'm going to list some bold statements, but true. 1, most black boys and men know more about football and basketball than their own history, culture, and defining ideas and values. Correct me if I'm wrong. Next, in hard numbers, there are more poor white people in the United States than black people. And white nationalist ideology that promotes white skin privilege gives white people opportunities that most black people do not and will not have. If the white rich and wealthy really cared about their own youth, why is there $1.2 trillion and growing student debt? Prior to Reagan, state schools pretty much were free. You paid tuition, you paid books and fees. All right. These state schools are almost as much as Temple. All right. Next, black people and Latinos, Hispanics are not in a mass number leaving the United States. We're not going anywhere. White people need to seriously adjust their attitudes, actions, lifestyles, and begin to re-educate, and that leans them toward a realistic understanding of people outside their white world. We're not going anywhere. Next, as long as Barack Obama is president, great many whites, low information, and highly educated voters will vote against their own interests. Next, whenever a black boy or man commits a crime that receives national attention, it is generally, fair or not, attached to all black people. And before we know the race of the offender, most blacks are saying under their breath, "Oh, we're not black." Next, black boys and men, unlike some other ethnic groups, do not have an effective lobbying firm or organization working on their behalf 24/7. Who lobbies for us? Not AIPAC. Next, drugs are not grown, created, conceived, developed, manufactured, produced, or delivered to the nationwide black community by black people. As an oppressed, dependent, occupied, depressed, vilified, and isolated community, too many young black men and some women see the local selling of drugs as an economic support and for a few a way out. Next, businesses in the black community do not represent or are not owned by black people. Black people spend over 90% of their money with white people and spend over 90% of their time criticizing the same people they give their money to. And I always say, we only do what we've been taught to do. You know, we're the only people who still send our children to the interview we be taught every day. And we think they're going to come back sane. The majority of black people live in fresh food deserts. It is common knowledge that black communities are surrounded and saturated with fast food establishments which base their profit on the sale of quickly fried meats, fish, chicken, and other quote-unquote foods. Combine this with black people's overconsumption of salt, sugar, and fats, and we have a recipe for health crisis such as obesity, high blood pressure, and the other quote-unquote food-related illnesses. This is very serious in the black community. Next, if we look at high-end black communities where the black upper and middle class live, this would also include the newly rich blacks, we immediately see one institution that does not work at the highest level in these well-off black communities. And that institution, high schools. They don't work. And many of them K through 8. And the final piece of fact. The fact is that President Barack Obama is the most hated, vilified, insulted, lied on, condemned, crash-dated, cartooned, derided, disliked, loathed, not cared for, maligned, disapproved of chief executive in the history of the United States. The only U.S. president that comes similarly close is Abraham Lincoln, and he was in the middle of a war, civil war. The primary reason for this state of white hatred of President Obama is because he is black, his family is black, and they live in the nation's White House. And white people do not want to have a black man to head this empire. And a perfect example, most certainly in terms of Republicans, last week or 2 weeks ago, a week and a half ago, Prime Minister Netanyahu, the head of state of Israel, was invited by John Boehner and the Republican leadership to address a joint session of Congress. That should never been done. The foreign policy comes out of the executive, okay? So all they want to do is diminish the status of the president and embarrass him on the international stage. And so also you saw, what, this week, the Republicans sent a direct letter to Iran. 47 signed on. And interesting enough, your favorite Senator McCain has come out and basically almost apologized for sending the letter because he knew it was wrong and incorrect. This was in financial, well, it's not financial, oh no, it's in the New York Times. In the book, in this new book, I have a long list of publications you should be reading. And primarily for information that will allow us to, oh here it is, right here. This was in yesterday's New York Times, a day before yesterday. So, is it Republicans' idiocy on Iran? And basically, I'm not going to read this whole thing, but McCain came out and said, I think we made a mistake. Yeah. Most black people and others do not realize that the United States is the world's only legitimate empire and its rulership is white. The most important institution of empire is their military. Also, we want to add this court system, especially the Supreme Court, that most black people do not watch. 5 of the Supreme Court justices are Catholic. That, and in many ways, guide their decisions, even the Negro. It is not surprising that 1.5 million black and brown boys and men are contained and locked down in the nation's criminal justice system. Most of these boys and men are poor, and have not had adequate legal representation. In fact, most of their sentencing have been plea bargained, and they are now are felons. And essentially, if they come out, they lose all their civil rights, voting, most employment opportunities, government-funded housing, education, quality education opportunities, and much more. Empire does not work for all of its citizens. So a very serious and renewed dilemma crippling the national black community in the United States is that the great majority of black people are not exposed to or informed by life-giving, life-affirming, and life-saving information and knowledge. Not only are we not aware of our constitutional rights that are quote-unquote guaranteed to us as citizens of the nation, we're constantly surrounded by the unhealthy excesses of empire. What? Dead food, overcrowded living conditions, poor education choices, a predatory economy, few green spaces, an unjust justice system, legal system, that the overly criminalized black and brown boys and men are an uncaring political complex and an unhealthy structure that has failed black, brown, and poor white people of the nation. We now live in America where its most cherished democratic values have been compromised by for sale politicians who are beholden to the 0.05% of the nation's criminally but legally rich and wealthy. They're the movers, shakers, and warmongers of empire, whether it's in Iraq or Afghanistan. I bring your attention to the latest issue of Forbes. Pick it up. This is empire. These are billionaires. And when you begin to look at the top 26 billionaires, the world's richest, starting at Bill Gates is $78.2 billion. What do you do with that kind of money? You see, other than try to get more money. You see what I'm saying? It is obscene. It really is. And so, but you look at that, the top 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, but the top 10, no, they're worth hundreds of billions of dollars. The Walton family alone, Walmart, Sam's Club. And one of the things I'm recommending in the book, we need to pick an industry and say, we're going to war. Let's go to war against Walmart. Don't shop at Walmart. You see what I'm saying? They're not unionized, okay? If you need to go, I mean, go to most of them. I always say black businesses first, and then other people who are not white, and then, you know, go to Target. At least Target has a union. All right, I hate to mention these people. But the point I'm trying to make is that the Waltons alone are worth $160 billion. All right? The Koch brothers, I mean, these are real criminals. The Koch brothers, I'm getting off my mind. The Koch brothers' fathers were one of the founders of the John Birch Society. That's the kind of history they come out of. Pick it up, you know. And if you, I mean, don't, you know, go to, I mean, liberate it. You know what I'm saying? I'm paying money for this. So the key point that I'm trying to make is that our people are not exposed. We just don't know. And I always say that we have, you know, we have ignorant people talking about how ignorant other people are. You know, black people talking at the top of their head. Well, I know this. I'm black because I've been black all my life. Not understanding that black is not just a color. You're talking about a culture. You're talking about much more than, you know, a consciousness. Right? So the major deed that necessitates empire is a continued supply of resources, natural resources. And of course, one of the major resources is oil. And of course, this is not new or revelatory information to you. So if one reads and studies the nation's most progressive newspapers, magazines, newsletters, and websites, and act proactively on the many suggestions come out of their pages, I think we've been in much better shape. Now, what I try to do in the book, I list about 50 publications you should be aware of. Newsletters, blogs, and all this stuff that you need to be reading. Since Sonia and I are retired now, I mean, I have more time, you know, to really get into this at another level. But modern empire commands whole-scale ignorance from its population, especially the youth. Those who will have to fight its illegal and unjust wars. White on black crime is a national and state secret. If one studies empire, it is clear that in order for the state to be successful, it must keep its minority, quote unquote, minority populations in order. Better yet, check as in checkmate. The two methods of accomplishing this task are: one, subtle and not so subtle force, that is, local, state, and national police force. Two, determined acculturation, that is, create an educational system which functions unbeknownst to those it impacts as a first-line recruiter for empire wars. When I was 18, I was poor, no family. I ended up in the military. I ended up in the Army. I joined the Army because it was the poor boys' answer to unemployment. And I knew that I could get GI Bill of Rights to go to university, to go to school. So we have some understanding now. The poor people in this country, black, Latino, white, they fight the wars, go on 2 or 3 tours and wonder why they come back with post-traumatic stress syndrome. 2 and 3 tours. The best way to stop the wars, reinstitute the draft. You start drafting this middle class, upper middle class, you know, it won't be any wars. I'm skipping a whole lot, okay? Especially in terms of criminality of the Bush administration. All right. In fact, there's a book, attorney and author Vincent Boligosi, in his 2008 book, The Prosecution of George W. Bush for Murder, was written, researched, and published after the Iraq War had brought death to close to 4,000 American military personnel, all poor for the most part, over 100,000 innocent Iraqi men, women, and children, and the elderly, and close to 2 to 3 million displaced Iraqis out of Iraq. They displaced them. I mean, so they destroyed the country, okay? And so, and Bush and his team are war criminals and acted in a way which is an embarrassment to the country. For those who are thinking, Joseph E. Stalin and Linda J. Blimes came in their book, The $3 Trillion War, The True Cost of Iraq Conflict. That's $3 trillion. But since then, it's another trillion. So you're talking about $4 trillion. Just think what we could do with $4 trillion if it came any place close to the black community at all. Okay. So the cost of the war continues to escalate due to the commitment of the United States now to Iraq and to, okay. I'm gonna move on. So I'm saying we are totally unaware of the true cost of our foreign engagement and the wars against other nations, for whatever the reasons. That's empire, okay? I believe that if the citizens knew, there would be a loud outcry for the return of the draft, rather than undemocratically sending and redeploying poor white, black, and brown men to tour of duty. And now it's women too. So I'm no stranger to these realities. I'm no stranger to this life of death struggle, this slow, sometimes fast drowning in the richest, most economically, scientific, technology, and military developed nation in the world. I'm no stranger to the love-hate relationship that most black people have with America. The majority of white population and their politics, economics, education, and overall culture have relegated the great majority of black people to the back avenues of slow drive without cars. In the 1990s, I completed and published one of the first books to honestly assess in detail the condition of black men, and by extension, the black family in the United States, which was titled Black Men, Obsolete, Single, Dangerous, the African-American Family in Transition. Sold over 1 million copies. We took that money and bought this property we have in Chicago. So I try to bring clarity to the black condition from an insider's point of view. Not contradicted by an integrated middle-class upbringing, not contradicted by an education, or conscious or unconscious desire to be accepted, lacked, or appreciated by white people. I came from and was raised among the poorest of the poor, without a living father, without a mother, with a mother working in the sex trade, incapable of weathering this storm, rearing me and my sister. My mother was dead at the age of 34, leaving us on our own to translate the many coming hurricanes. And I provide detail about this in my book, Yellow Black Memoir, okay? So I published this book, and I quote about 5 paragraphs from Black Men. And I'm just going to read one paragraph. Oppression is oppression. And the quibble over degrees of oppression more often than not is an accurate measurement of the effect of the white oppression. However, there are some basic male dynamics that need to be understood. Men run the world. This is not a sexist statement, but one of fact. Also, men fight men and women to maintain control of their part of the world. There may be women in leadership position, elected and opponent, but they are there because men see such concessions as politically wise and in the best interest of men. White men control most of the world, economically, politically, and militarily, and undoubtedly control all of the Western northern world. Other facts are, one, white men do not fear white women. Understand, they're partners. They're concerned, but fearful, no. White men and white women are partners, be it senior and junior partner. Okay. Two, white men do not fear black women. The white man's relationship to black women traditionally has been one of use, sexually and otherwise. The widespread of color that exists among black people proves this point. It was white men raping black women that produced the mixed-race black person worldwide. That's why I'm here, all right? And, you know, I don't have no direct white father, thankful for that. But he was a dog anyway. He was never there. He was never there. White men do fear black men. This fear may not be spoken or obvious to many black people, but if one understands the history of white male-black male relationships, it is quite evident that it is a history of war and the horrid and severe physical and psychological enslavement and elimination of black men by white men. Sterling Brown's poet, classic words are instructive here when he says a white man venture into the black community, they don't come by ones, they don't come by twos, they come by tens. So the black male, white male confrontation, not only racial and cultural, it is also a serious question of what group of men is going to rule the world. The concept of shared power has always been a major question within the white male ethos, especially if it involves inclusion of men outside its racial cultural grouping. It must be understood that white men actually don't lack or trust each other. Their cultural, religious, and national wars are legendary. Any serious study of European wars will validate this point. When one analyzes the warlike nature white men exhibit among each other, only the naive and severely mentally handicapped would expect white males' attitude toward black male to be any different than they are. These attitudes are historical, cultural, and therefore psychological and intimate. To change such negative and natural, quote unquote, natural attitudes will require a revolution of the most profound kind. Okay? So, let me move on. So one of the major points I make in black men is that which we face hourly in the United States is a result of local, state, national white supremacist policy. Lawmakers of whom the great majority are white and very protective of their power and sacred spaces, and are not about to give quarter to any former enslaved or recently non-white immigrants. This is one of the reasons that the National Rifle Association is so powerful and effectively constitute an open yet non-obvious lobbying agency for white people. Think about this for a minute. Too many white people, the final solution to this problem is violence. And their guns and weapons against any population is the equalizer and the final answer. The right wing are against unions, correct or not correct? But they don't go after police unions. They don't go after firemen unions. They don't go after the first responder unions, all right? So they're after some unions. The postal union, all right? The automobile union and so forth. And so I'm saying that we have to understand that when we talk about whiteness, that we're talking about how do they protect themselves. What time, Donna, how much time is it?
1 o'clock.
It's almost 1? Oh, wow. I done missed, yeah, I had all this to go. But I'm gonna go and try to get down to some solutions right quick, okay? So y'all can buy the book when it come out. Because I deal with violence, poverty, white supremacy, and health. I'm strongly, you know, when I was talking about white supremacy and white nationalism, the philosophy of white supremacy, in terms of fairness, we must always make critical and studied distinctions between individual whites and the larger national white groupings, okay? There are good white people in the world, no doubt about that. The major problem is that there are not enough of them. And those who exist generally do not make public policy. They don't command armies, control vital institutions, or manage enormous amounts of wealth. Okay? So you just can't say, you know, I'm saying you make these distinctions. And so, but we live in this culture of poverty, black people, which too often breeds a culture of low expectations. Translate to black youth who are often victims of a mindset that puts too low value on the acquisition of knowledge. This is critical. The acquisition of knowledge, learning, high reading and writing skills. The average brother locked down in these prisons can't read at the 5th grade level. If you can't read at the 5th grade level, you can't write at the 4th grade level. If you can't read at the 5th grade level, write at the 4th grade level, what kind of work can you do out here? That's why the underground at one level exists within the context of the black community. That's all these brothers can do. You know, sell illicit drugs and whatever else they can get, liberate, all right? So if you can't read and think, compute, do math above high school level, it is just about impossible to advance or make a livable wage in any highly advanced, knowledge-based, and technological society. That is, like it or not, the status of the majority of black people in America. Most black folks have to work 2, 3 jobs, low-paying jobs, just to make ends meet. And finally, within this, no less important, and this is critical, is one's psychological health. Over the last 35, 40 years, a kind of learned helplessness or learned dependency has slowly evaded a large portion of the black community. That is a feeling we can't do what other people do, or to bring about real, lasting, life-giving, and life-sustaining change in our communities. And so I'm saying that we have got to deal with that problem. And so too little is given to black overall wellness. Black people are surrounded by anti-wellness in the form of fast food, inadequate health care, poor and failing schools, and a hyper-commercial culture are trying to keep up with the materially, intellectually, and morally bankrupt backwardness of the ruling and entertainment class. We watch more television than anybody, all right? And this has partially crippled us because the kind of information that we allow in our home does not develop us. You walk into the Blockson Center, immediately, not an afterthought, you know it's black. You know it's African American. You know it's African. That's what we need to have when we walk into your homes. So when I walk into your home, immediately what I'm going to see, first thing is it clean? All right? What's on the walls? What's, you know, what images do you have? Are the images reflecting the best of your culture, your people? Then go to your bookshelf, if you got a bookshelf. What are you reading? Because what you read defines you. And then you go to your CD collection. What kind of music are you listening to? Great black music or booty call music? What are you listening to? Then you go to the DVD collection. What are you listening? You know, what are you looking at night? Now, I'm talking about the DVDs that are wrapped up in the brown paper bags. What are you looking at night? Okay. But to really tell what our family is, go into the children's room. What's on their walls? Darth Vader, Mickey Mouse, and Donald Duck, and you wonder why we are confused. Right? Our children. Well, we have to understand that nothing is more important than our children. You see. So I write about the police culture. You know, how basically police culture is a culture that protects itself and protects white people. That's what it protects its own brand, and even when you just know you wrong, you get them and say, well, you really didn't see what you saw. All right. So police culture is a military culture, whose members are more dedicated to those they serve with first and foremost. And I learned this in the military. So institutionalized racism, or white supremacy, is a philosophical foundation that most police departments in the United States are built upon and do not recognize or accept any criticism from non-whites or politicians who do not toe their line. So the recent highly respectful action in New York City against Mayor de Blasio is clear. I don't respect you if you're not going to do what we say, you know, forget that. Then I talk about gladiator culture. Gladiator culture is basically out here trying to play some basketball, trying to play some football, and think you're going to make a living at it, all right? And it is really very, very racist. Donald Silver taught us that right quick, out there with the basketball team, out there in California, all right? But interestingly enough, another white man bought the team for $2 billion. So it raised the cost in terms of the owners of basketball teams and the owners of football teams are getting over like bandits. So the major mover and shaker among young black men and boys today falls into 3 categories. 1, who run the streets, underground economy, gangs. 2, sports, mainly basketball, football. And 3, popular entertainment, hip hop, rap, and music. So I can't go into this, I'm going to move on. But I go into that deeply in terms of the book. So what I need to do is just get quickly, and I apologize, is to try to give some solutions right quick. Here are a few examples of meaningful change that work. 1, the acquisition of life-giving, life-sustaining knowledge and skills should be a priority in this country. And industries in the country should not be outsourced, but insourced into the black community, into poor communities, and so forth. We need to insource, rather than send them to China or India, they need to be insourced. They don't outsource the armament industry. You see, they're not also outsourcing building ships and stuff. So I'm not against globalization, but first let's make our own citizens a global workforce. And so each house, each home, each apartment, each living space must become a mini learning institution. So you can have a library in your home because paperbacks, so that's true. 2, children first. Children first. Birth, from birth, our children must be viewed as potential geniuses. We must accept the fact of their young brilliance and be prepared to nurture them by providing cultural, spiritual, education, political, healthcare, and financial structures that will help in running their and nurturing their young natural gifts. Children must be loved and nurtured, and I go deeply into that. 3, know more about your own culture than other people. Black culture knowledge and critical thinking about oneself, people, and the world is vital. A university education or advanced technological knowledge is imperative in today's political economic climate. However, seldom will African American students receive an enlightened black education at most European American institutions of higher education, and sad to say, very few black colleges and universities too. And then within the context of that, I list 150 writers, poets, historians, serious thinkers that you should be reading. So I give you 150 people. You need to have these people in your library, all right? If I'll find a good library to read. You need to read these books. See, the problem is once you gain this knowledge, you're going to get angry. And I know I'm talking to like the choir here, you know what I'm saying? But the point is, number 4, black women. Black women have become the backbone of the black community. In a world ruled by men, we're losing black boys and men like poor people's dollars in a state lottery. So we must always be in the forefront of demanding and protecting the equality of women and men. However, not enough responsible black men exist. It's a real problem. We got too many young black women coming out of these high schools, going to these colleges and universities. They can't find husbands. It's a serious problem. It was a serious problem when I broke black men. It is a serious problem today. My wife and I were talking about it the other night. In terms of a lot of the young sisters who have graduated from these major research one universities and Ivy League, who are doctors, who are lawyers, and they by themselves. Okay. And I go deeply into that. Then number 5, the black rich and wealthy. Let me just say this for a minute. The black rich and wealthy must step up to change, play quick. I'm sick of hearing about Shaq's cars. You know what I'm saying? And of course, what's the basketball player from Chicago? What's his name? Jordan. Michael Jordan. Now, of course, he's a billionaire. So what? That, he leaves his black wife, marries this alien, all right? And of course, they got a child now. I don't know, you know what I'm saying? Now he's a billionaire. And what I'm saying essentially is the black rich among us must understand we are living in a critical times, and our young people. See, first you take care of your biological family, then your extended family. Then you talk about the national family. I'm not even talking about adults. I'm talking about children. And what I'm saying to these clowns, you need to adopt a school. Adopt a black school. You see? And mainly high school. But not just adopt it in terms of your monies and funds. You got to be there. Even if you just went once a month. All right? But with the kind of money these guys are making, that you can bring somebody whom you trust. See, the problem with this, well, they're going to misuse, they're going to be corrupt and so forth. Well, hire somebody to watch the money. But adopt a school. I got other stuff here. But I'm saying institutions are critical. And I use examples of Chicago in terms of the Polish, in terms of the Irish. The Irish run the whole state of Chicago, of Illinois. And it's $100 billion in debt. $100 billion in debt. Nobody in jail. So I'm saying at every level of human involvement, brothers and sisters, we need independent black institutions. That's why the radio station is so critical. At every level, any people who are in control of their own cultural imperatives about the healthy replication of themselves, first and foremost. And so therefore these institutional structures are critical and very important. You know, the Jewish people in America and the world, most certainly after the Holocaust, have been very effective in their development of Jewish institutions. They not only work for them, but also work for others also. You know, when Jews couldn't go to a hospital, they built a hospital. When they're going to go to a country club, they built a country club. Okay? However, when a people, Jews, have close to 100% voting record in Congress for most of it, all of its concerns, I will state rather emphatically that they, as a people, are functioning in their best interests. The Jewish people have many lobbying entities other than individual congressmen and women, and one of the most effective is AIPAC, American Israeli PAC. Who lobbies for black people 24/7? All right? I'm saying, and I got just 2 chapters on black women. You know what I'm saying? We live in a world where patriarchal leadership as most cultures is the norm, where a man, a father, a grandfather, a brother, an uncle, a son, or in a family, almost any family, rules as a man just because of his, you know what I'm saying? So if you truly love women, folk of your family, you must ask yourself several critical questions. Do I love, care for, and respect the females of my family the same deep level that I love, care for, and respect the males of the family? If the answer is yes, then the next question is, am I willing to make the same and often greater commitment to the females of my family that I made to the males? Am I willing to encourage them to reach for their dreams and to assist them in the best of my ability in developing their minds, their bodies, and spirits, to assist them in nurturing their natural talents and support a family environment that is free, open, and encouraging? Am I willing to be a vocal advocate of women's equality and liberation inside the family, in public when I'm a man with other men and boys on the job, the basketball court, football field, and so forth? So the point is that, again, ignorance is contagious and breeds like overfed roaches in most rich, middle class, and impoverished communities. Outdated and non-functioning customs and traditions exist in most, if not all, cultures dominated by men. In far too many cultures, women and children are still viewed as property to be put on the table of deals that guaranteed most of them a life of suffering, pain, unhappiness, and servitude. The same must be said for the male-dominated hip-hop culture. These cultures must be questioned and, if necessary, confronted wherever they exist. I mean, I got more of this, okay? But I'm not, I got a whole book list for just reading about women, you know? And then I got 100 and more reasons to believe in women liberation. I got about 150 names here, including Sonia, including Beverly Lomax and others, that you need to know about the work these people are doing, okay? Then I got a section on art. You know, art is critical. If you have art in your home, if you have artists in your family, what artists do? We think outside the box. We think tangential to the circle. We question everything, all right? And artists are that which has the power to save lives, to change lives, to give birth to imagination that can power questions from unknown spaces of one's expanded brain when unlocking the mystery of misunderstood relationships and loves, all while celebrating the high and lows of one's undisciplined, careless, clueless, narrowly focused vision until it truly becomes a vision, thereby humanizing all future growth of a person's production is art. I got more, but I'm just, you know. So the white dark secret. This is, see, look, I know what people say about me. You just, look at his color. He's too black. He's too black. You know, look at his color. He's still too black. No problem. But don't ever accuse me of being too white. That's the difference. Is that we have to understand that we essentially, that dark secret, the white dark secret in America, black, this is it, and I'll end with this. In America, black people are no longer needed as a critical labor force. Over 40 million plus population is not significant to the continued development of the United States, with minor exceptions of fighting in foreign and domestic wars. Yes, we will kill our own people. We are not needed to pick cotton, vegetables or fruit. Latinos, Hispanics are doing that. Skilled labor, Eastern Europeans. To rebuild the nation's infrastructure, the trade unions are still highly tribal and racist to the bone. The current population of the United States, as of 2014, is about 310.1 million, making it the third largest population in the world behind China and India. The white poor in the United States is about 10% of the population, which makes its real numbers about 31 million. The black poor is approximately 10.9 million, poor. Population about 40 million. About 28% of the population is poor. The Hispanic percentage of poor people, 25%, which is roughly around 10 million. So the point I'm trying to make is that the whites still vote against his own best interests. Many Hispanics and Latinos in many cases still have language problems. And black people, we work in 8 jobs trying to make ends meet. So don't be too hard on our people. And these young boys out here, and the young women, young girls, they only do what they've been taught to do. So we got to be beginning to develop structures that will bring these young people in, love them, give them hope, and tell them how beautiful they are. If you go up every day, tell somebody, how ugly you are every day.
Right. Go on,
So deep and honest knowledge of one's culture is absolutely necessary, especially as we fight to navigate our lives in an ever-evolving and increasingly difficult world. Again, so any people who are anchored in their own cultural imperatives, visual art, literature, history, science, music, religion, politics, economics, surely will walk more confidently than the people with little or negative knowledge about themselves. The harm and the damage that the state does to its own people, what these white people do to white people, means that it's capable of doing greater harm to others, non-whites. So the collective intelligence and cultural memory of our best minds have got to be passed on to our people. And so critical knowledge is absolutely necessary. Okay, I know I need to stop here. It's much more. Oh, what I do have in the book, I have the copy of the Bill of Rights, a copy of the Constitution, and a copy of the United Nations statement on human rights. Because I talk about Malcolm and human rights in the book and so forth. Sonia, I know I'm gonna lose my poet's license. I didn't read no poems and nothing like that.
You don't have to. That was a long time.
Right. Okay. So let me just take a few questions and then try to. Let me just say that finally. I say this. 71% of black children in America are born to unwed mothers. We gotta get back to family. You gotta have family. 53% of Hispanic children, 36% of white children. Okay. And I end with 2 poems by Jahari Amini. Jahari Amini said, brothers, brothers everywhere, and not a one for sale. And then she ended up, she's saying, I'd give the brother anything he wanted if he wanted something. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. So,